Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. I thought our wedding day would be the culmination of everything we had worked for. I'd spent months planning every detail, every moment leading up to this day. Our vows were written, our guests seated, and our hearts intertwined. It felt like nothing could go wrong. But just as we said, "I do," everything changed. She appeared, stepping into the room as if she had always belonged there. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The entire room went silent, and I could feel the air in the room shift. Her eyes locked onto my husband, Jason, and I could see his face pale as if he had just seen a ghost. The woman before me was not someone I knew, not someone I had expected to see on my wedding day. But there she was, standing tall, wearing a knowing smile. She held a letter in her hand, one that seemed to carry a weight far heavier than any piece of paper should. I looked at Jason for any explanation, but the words he could have spoken were stuck somewhere deep inside him. Who was she? What was going on? The questions were running through my mind, but I couldn't form them into anything coherent. My gaze shifted between Jason and the woman, trying to make sense of this impossible scene. She didn't seem like a stranger. There was a familiarity in her presence, a certainty that she belonged here. I could feel the entire atmosphere of the room tense, like everyone was holding their breath. The woman stepped forward, her eyes not once leaving Jason. "Do you really think you're ready for this?" she asked, her voice calm, yet filled with an edge that sent shivers down my spine. My eyes never left her as I tried to make sense of what was happening. My heart was racing, my hands trembling slightly. Was this some sort of cruel joke? Was this part of some twisted game they were playing? Jason, the man I was about to marry, stood there frozen, his mouth slightly open as if he were searching for words that refused to come. The silence was suffocating, and the words that hung between us felt too heavy to bear. "Who is she?" I whispered, though it came out more like a breathless gasp. The room was silent, except for the ticking of the clock and the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. Jason's face had drained of color, his eyes wide and haunted, but he didn't speak. I felt the weight of the moment settle on me, suffocating me. Who was this woman? Why was she here? I had no idea what to think, what to do. My eyes darted to the woman who was now looking at me with a strange, almost pitying expression. "She doesn't know, does she?" The woman's voice was dripping with sarcasm, but beneath it, there was something darker. "You've been living a lie, sweetheart. He's not the man you think he is." My world tilted on its axis. What was she talking about? How could she know so much? And why was she telling me this now, on the most important day of my life? My body went cold, my mind spinning. Everything I had believed about my fiancé, the man I was about to marry, suddenly felt like it was unraveling before my eyes. I couldn't look away from her, even though I felt like I should. Her presence was overwhelming, like a shadow that had always been there, lurking in the background of my life. She turned her gaze toward me, a slight smirk on her face as if she were enjoying my discomfort. "You think you know him?" she asked, her voice condescending. "You think he's your perfect match?" Her words felt like a slap to the face, each one leaving a sting deeper than the last. I could barely form a coherent thought as I stood there, trapped between the woman who claimed to know him and the man I was supposed to trust with my life. What was she going to say next? What kind of truth was she about to reveal? "He's been hiding something from you," she continued, her voice carrying an air of finality. "A secret that will shatter everything you think you know about him." I stared at her, trying to process what was happening. My heart was racing, my thoughts scattered like broken pieces. I turned to Jason, searching for an explanation, for any sign that this was just some misunderstanding. But there was nothing. His face was pale, his lips pressed into a thin line. The weight of his silence was unbearable. Why wasn't he saying anything? "What is she talking about?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and frustration. My mind was reeling with possibilities, none of them good. What kind of secrets had he been keeping from me? What could be so bad that he couldn't even share it with me, the woman he was supposed to love? Jason's gaze flickered to the woman, and then to me, but he remained silent. I could feel the tension in the air thickening, the truth just out of reach, but right in front of me. The ex-wife's eyes gleamed with something dark, like she had a secret she was dying to expose. I could almost feel the ground shifting beneath me as she prepared to reveal whatever it was that had brought her here today. I couldn't stand the silence any longer. My breath was shallow, my chest tight. Who are you? I demanded, the words rushing out before I could stop them. The woman smiled, as if she had been waiting for me to ask that question. I'm his ex-wife, she said simply, her voice dripping with something like satisfaction. The one he's been keeping hidden from you. Her words felt like a punch to the gut. I glanced at Jason, my heart aching with the realization that everything I thought I knew about him was a lie. The truth hung between us, unspoken but undeniable. You lied to me? I whispered, the betrayal starting to sink in. Jason's eyes flickered with guilt, but he didn't speak. How long had this woman been a part of his life? How much had he kept hidden from me? And why had he never told me about her? The weight of her presence in that room was unbearable, and I could feel my world crumbling around me. I needed answers, and I needed them now. The woman's gaze never left Jason, as if she were waiting for him to break his silence. You don't get to have a clean slate, Jason, she said, her voice cool and controlled. Not after everything you've done. My mind was spinning. What was she talking about? What had he done? Jason finally spoke, but his words were barely a whisper. I didn't want you to know. I never wanted you to find out about my past. His voice trembled, and for the first time, I saw a crack in his carefully constructed facade. My heart sank. What kind of person had I married? You don't get to keep your secrets anymore, the ex-wife said, her tone firm. It's time for the truth to come out. I felt the blood drain from my face as I looked back at her. What truth? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes locked onto mine, and she took a step closer. The truth about why he's really here, why he really married you. The air felt thick, suffocating, and I knew that whatever came next would change everything. Jason's face was a mask of guilt and shame, his eyes avoiding mine. I could feel my heart breaking as I stood there, waiting for him to speak, to explain himself. But the ex-wife wasn't finished. You really think this is some fairy tale, don't you? She said, turning to me with a sneer. You think he's the knight in shining armor, that he's perfect and innocent. My stomach churned. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice barely steady. The ex-wife looked at Jason again, her eyes hardening. He's not who you think he is. He's been using you all along. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. Using me? I repeated, my mind struggling to comprehend what she was saying. Jason looked like he wanted to run, to disappear, but he didn't say a word. The ex-wife laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. He's not here for love. He's here for the money. My breath caught in my throat. Was she saying what I thought she was saying? You married me for money? I choked out, the words tasting like acid in my mouth. Jason didn't respond, but the look in his eyes said everything. Everything I thought I knew about my relationship with Jason suddenly felt like a lie. How could he have married me for money? How could he have kept this from me, hidden it so well? My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all, but there were no answers. Only more questions. The ex-wife stepped closer to me, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. You deserve to know the truth, she said, her eyes dark and filled with something I couldn't quite name. He's been using you for your wealth, your connections. He's not the man you think he is. I wanted to scream, to demand more, but my voice wouldn't come. My entire world was falling apart around me. I turned to Jason, desperate for him to say something, anything, to deny what she was saying. But he stayed silent, his eyes lowered, his face a mask of regret. I could feel the anger building inside me, a fire that I didn't know how to control. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered, my voice shaking with emotion. Why did you lie to me? The silence that followed was deafening, and I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. Jason's silence was unbearable. My heart ached, a dull, persistent pain that I couldn't escape. The woman's words echoed in my mind, replaying over and over. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't the man I thought I knew. This wasn't the man I had promised to spend my life with. You don't understand. Jason finally spoke, his voice hoarse, filled with regret. I didn't want this. I never wanted to hurt you. But his words felt hollow, empty. How could he say he didn't want to hurt me when everything he had done was designed to deceive me? The ex-wife watched him, a look of satisfaction in her eyes. You think you can just erase your past? She asked, her voice dripping with contempt. You can't. It's always going to follow you. Jason looked at her, then back at me, his face torn with emotion. I didn't know how to tell you, he whispered. I didn't know how to make you understand. The weight of his confession hung in the air, suffocating me. Could I ever trust him again? The silence between us stretched on for what felt like an eternity. I couldn't believe what was happening. My heart felt like it was shattering into pieces, each one cutting deeper than the last. So this was all a lie? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, but the words carried so much weight. Jason's eyes filled with guilt, but still, no explanation came. The woman, his ex-wife, seemed to revel in my confusion and pain, like it was all part of some sick game. You deserve to know the whole truth, she said with a cold smile, her eyes never leaving Jason. It's not just about the money. It's about everything he's kept from you. All the people he's used, all the lives he's ruined. The weight of her words hit me like a ton of bricks, and I felt the ground beneath me start to tremble. Could this really be true? Could Jason really be the monster she was describing? Stop it. Jason finally spoke, his voice breaking. It's not what you think. Please, just let me explain. But the ex-wife wasn't done. Let him explain, she scoffed. You don't think he's been lying to you all along? I looked between the two of them, my mind racing, my heart aching with confusion and disbelief. Jason's ex-wife wasn't backing down, and Jason's face was twisted with guilt, but he still wasn't saying anything. I felt like I was drowning in this storm of secrets and lies. What is he hiding from me? I asked, turning to Jason for an answer, but his silence spoke volumes. The woman stepped closer to me, her voice softer now, almost as if she were trying to console me. You're not the first person he's done this to, she said, her tone laced with bitterness. He's used people for everything they have, and when he's done with them, he moves on, just like he's planning to do with you. My blood ran cold. Could she be right? Could this whole marriage have been nothing more than another one of his schemes? That's not true, Jason said, his voice strained. I love you. I never meant for any of this to happen. But his words felt empty, hollow. How could I believe him when everything he had done pointed to the opposite? The room felt like it was closing in on me. My chest was tight, and my head was spinning. How could everything have been a lie? How could I have been so blind? The woman's words were like poison, slowly seeping into my mind, making me question everything I thought I knew. You can't trust him, she said, her eyes narrowing. Not now, not ever. He'll only bring you pain. I turned to Jason, searching for any hint of sincerity, but all I saw was a man who had betrayed me in ways I couldn't even begin to comprehend. Please, just tell me the truth, I pleaded, my voice shaking. Tell me what's been going on. Jason looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and fear, but still, he didn't speak. The ex-wife shook her head. He's not going to tell you anything. He's too deep in his lies to come clean now. Her words stung, but they felt like a wake-up call. I had to make a decision. Was I going to stay and try to work things out, or was I going to walk away from this toxic relationship? The weight of the decision was crushing, but I knew I couldn't go on living a lie. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it was. I looked at Jason, my heart heavy with the knowledge that this moment would change everything. Tell me everything, I demanded, my voice firm despite the turmoil inside me. For the first time, Jason looked like he was going to break. His face twisted with emotion, and I could see the tears welling up in his eyes. I didn't want to hurt you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know how to tell you about my past, about the things I've done. I was afraid you'd leave me. His words felt like a dagger to the heart. So you thought lying to me was the answer? I asked, my voice trembling with anger. You thought keeping secrets from me would make everything better? Jason hung his head, unable to meet my gaze. I was trying to protect you, he said softly. But I see now that I've only hurt you more. The woman's laugh was bitter. He's always had an excuse. That's what he does. He manipulates people, makes them feel sorry for him. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could feel was the overwhelming sense of betrayal. You don't get to protect me, I said, my voice shaking with fury. You don't get to make me feel sorry for you. You've lied to me, Jason. You've lied from the beginning. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wasn't going to let him see how much this was breaking me. The ex-wife crossed her arms, watching with a knowing look. You see now, don't you? She said, her voice almost pitying. He'll do the same thing to you that he did to me, and to every other woman before you. I looked at Jason, searching his face for any hint of remorse, any sign that he truly cared for me. But all I saw was a man who had been hiding behind a mask for far too long. I can't do this, I whispered, the realization settling in. I can't be with someone who's built their life on lies. Jason looked like I had slapped him. Please, Don't leave me, he begged, his voice desperate. But it was too late. The damage had been done. I felt a strange sense of finality as I stepped back, away from Jason. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the loss of everything I thought was real. The life we had built together, the promises we made to each other, all of it had crumbled in an instant. I turned to the ex-wife, whose presence had felt like a shadow hanging over us from the moment she arrived. "You're right," I said, my voice firm. "I can't be with him. Not after everything he's done." Her eyes narrowed in satisfaction, but there was no smugness, no victory in her gaze. Just an emptiness that mirrored what I felt inside. Jason reached for me, his hand trembling. "Please," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you." But I couldn't bring myself to believe him anymore. The words felt rehearsed, like he had said them 1,000 times before to women just like me. "You don't get to apologize anymore," I said, my voice cold. "Not when everything you've done is a lie." I turned away from him, the pain in my chest unbearable. My future with him was gone. I could feel Jason's eyes on my back, his desperation thick in the air, but I couldn't bring myself to turn around. I didn't know how to fix this, how to repair the broken trust. As I walked out of the room, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. My mind was a swirl of thoughts, but there was one thing that stood out above everything else. I couldn't stay. I had to leave him, for my own peace of mind, for my own future. The ex-wife followed me, her steps quiet but determined. "You're making the right choice," she said, her voice softer now. "I know this is hard, but you'll be better off without him." I nodded, but the tears that burned at the back of my eyes were almost impossible to keep in check. How had everything gone so wrong? How had I not seen it coming? "Do you think he'll change?" I asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. The ex-wife shook her head, her expression unreadable. "He never changes," she said, her voice flat. "Once a liar, always a liar." I was sitting in the car, alone with my thoughts, when my phone buzzed. I didn't have to look at the screen to know it was Jason. My heart twisted in my chest as I stared at the message. "Please don't leave me," it read. "I'll do anything to fix this. I can change." The words hit me like a slap, but deep down, I knew they didn't mean anything. They were just words, the same ones he'd said 100 times before. I had heard the lies for so long that they no longer held any weight. I put my phone down, not responding. The only thing I could do now was move on. I didn't know what my future held, but I knew it was better without him in it. He wasn't the man I thought he was. I couldn't live a life full of lies and deceit. But even as I made the decision to move forward, the ache in my chest was unbearable. Had I made the right choice? Would I ever find someone who truly loved me for who I was? The weeks after the wedding felt like a blur. I threw myself into work, trying to bury the pain of what had happened. But no matter how hard I tried, Jason's face, his words, the betrayal, it all haunted me. Everywhere I went, it seemed like there was a reminder of him. I couldn't escape the memories of what we had once shared. But then, one evening, I received a call. It was from Jason's ex-wife. "I need to warn you," she said, her voice urgent. "Jason's been trying to reach you. He's desperate, and he's not going to stop until he gets what he wants." I felt a chill run down my spine. What did she mean by that? "What do you mean, what he wants?" I asked, my heart racing. She hesitated before speaking again. "He's not just after your money, not anymore. He's obsessed with you, and he'll stop at nothing to make you come back." My stomach dropped. This wasn't just about the lies anymore. Jason had crossed a line. My pulse raced as the gravity of the ex-wife's warning set in. Jason was no longer just the man I had married. He was someone dangerous, someone who wouldn't take no for an answer. The feeling of being trapped, of being cornered, washed over me like a tidal wave. I couldn't believe this was happening, that the man I had once loved had become a threat to my peace of mind. What should I do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The ex-wife was quiet for a moment before answering. "Don't trust him. Don't let him manipulate you again. He'll use every trick in the book to get you back, but he's not capable of love. He's only capable of control." Her words struck a chord deep within me. This wasn't just a relationship. It was an abusive cycle, one that I needed to break free from for good. But the fear lingered, and I wasn't sure what to do next. Should I go to the police? Should I get a restraining order? What if he came after me again? The uncertainty was overwhelming, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't go back. Days turned into weeks, and Jason's attempts to reach me only became more desperate. Text messages, phone calls, and even letters flooded my inbox, all begging for forgiveness. "I made a mistake," they said. "Please, come back." But each message felt like a weight on my shoulders, a constant reminder of the man I thought I knew, of the man he truly was. I had made the decision to move on, but it wasn't easy. The fear of what he might do next lingered in the back of my mind. Every knock on my door made my heart race, and every phone call sent a jolt of panic through my chest. What if Jason wouldn't let me go? What if he tried to force me back into his life? My resolve was strong, but the fear of his obsession made me feel vulnerable. I had to stay strong. I had to make sure he couldn't hurt me again. But as I scrolled through the latest message from him, a single question lingered in my mind. Would he ever stop? One night, after a particularly persistent barrage of messages, I decided to confront the situation head-on. I went to the police station, hoping they could offer some guidance on how to handle Jason's increasingly erratic behavior. The officer I spoke to listened carefully, taking down the details of my case. "He's crossed a line," the officer said gravely. "Harassment is a serious matter, and we take it seriously." The words provided a small sense of relief. It was reassuring to know that I had options, that I wasn't alone in this. But the officer's next words sent a chill down my spine. "We may need to put a restraining order in place to protect you. If he continues to contact you, we can intervene." The reality of the situation hit me like a slap in the face. This wasn't just a messy breakup. It was something far darker, something I wasn't prepared for. I left the station that night with a mixture of dread and determination. The police were on my side now, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Jason would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. A few days after filing the report, I received a package. It was small, unmarked, and left on my doorstep without any note. My stomach churned as I picked it up, my mind racing with all the possible contents. Was it from Jason? Had he gone to the extreme to get my attention? I hesitated for a moment, but curiosity got the best of me. When I opened the box, I found a small, silver locket. Inside was a photograph of Jason and me from our wedding day, a day that now seemed like a distant memory. My fingers trembled as I held it, and my heart dropped into my stomach. What was he trying to say by sending this? Was this his way of trying to guilt me into returning to him? Or was it a warning, a reminder of his control over me? The question lingered in my mind, unanswered. I didn't want to keep the locket, but I couldn't bring myself to throw it away either. It felt like another piece of the puzzle, another clue in this twisted game Jason had been playing with me all along. That night, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about the locket, about Jason, and about the strange hold he still seemed to have over me. Even after everything that had happened, I couldn't shake the lingering feelings of doubt and confusion. What if he really did love me? What if I was making a mistake by walking away? The thought gnawed at me, but deep down, I knew the truth. Jason had never loved me, not in the way I had believed. He loved the idea of control, of using people to get what he wanted, and once he had no use for me, he discarded me like everyone else. The realization hit me hard. I had to let go of the fantasy of what we could have been and face the harsh reality of what Jason truly was. The next morning, I made a call to the police, asking for an update on my case. I needed reassurance that I wasn't alone in this, that I wasn't just a victim of his manipulation. I was determined to take control of my life, to stop being a pawn in his twisted game. The officer I spoke to confirmed that a restraining order had been filed against Jason, and they had started monitoring his movements. My heart eased slightly knowing that steps were being taken to ensure my safety. But as much as I tried to feel relief, a small voice in my head kept whispering, "What if he doesn't stop?" The fear of what Jason might do next still haunted me, and it felt like I was walking on eggshells every time I left my house. But I wasn't about to let him take any more of my peace. That afternoon, I decided to leave town for a while. I didn't want to be a prisoner in my own home, constantly looking over my shoulder. I packed a bag, told a few close friends about what had been happening, and made arrangements to stay with family in another city. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it was the break I needed to clear my mind and regain my sense of control. I knew Jason's obsession wouldn't just disappear, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was taking back my life. The days I spent away from home felt like a strange reprieve. It wasn't the kind of freedom I had imagined for myself, but it was still a break from the constant anxiety that had gripped me since the wedding. I stayed with my sister, who was supportive and concerned but didn't fully understand the depth of what I was going through. She had never experienced what it felt like to be manipulated by someone so cunning. But I was grateful for her company. Each night, I was able to sleep a little better, without the nagging fear that Jason would show up at my door, demanding answers. But the quiet wasn't enough to drown out the worry. I couldn't stop wondering what Jason was doing, what lengths he might go to now. His ex-wife's warning echoed in my mind. He'll stop at nothing. The thought made my skin crawl, and I found myself constantly checking my phone, waiting for the next message or call. Was he out there, still watching, still obsessed? It had been nearly 2 weeks since I left town, but it felt like a lifetime. Every day felt longer, like time was stretching out in a way that made me feel suspended in some kind of limbo. I was halfway through my trip when I got a call that made my blood run cold. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, but it didn't take long to recognize it. It was Jason. "You can run, but you can't hide," he said, his voice low and almost threatening. I felt the breath catch in my throat. "What do you want, Jason?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want you back," he replied simply, "and I'll do whatever it takes to make that happen. You're not getting away from me. Not now, not ever." His words sent a cold shiver down my spine. I didn't know what to do. Should I hang up? Should I call the police? But the terror of hearing his voice again was enough to paralyze me for a moment. The call ended abruptly, and I was left staring at my phone, my heart racing. He wasn't going to stop. The fear that had been bubbling inside me suddenly felt real. Jason was out there, somewhere, trying to find me. I could hear his voice in my mind, those chilling words replaying over and over. "You're not getting away from me. Not ever." I felt trapped again, even though I was hundreds of miles away from home. The fact that he had found me, had tracked me down, made everything feel so much worse. My sister noticed the change in me immediately. "What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, concern evident in her eyes. I didn't want to scare her, didn't want to drag her into this madness, but I couldn't hide it anymore. "Jason called me." I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. "He said I couldn't hide from him. He said I'm not getting away." Her face paled as she processed the information. "You need to come home," she said, her tone firm. "You can't let him intimidate you like this." But I wasn't so sure. Jason was no longer just a husband I had walked away from. He was a force I couldn't predict, someone who was playing a dangerous game. Was going home the right choice, or was I walking straight back into a trap? After my sister's insistence, I returned home. I couldn't keep running, not forever. But the moment I stepped back into my apartment, it felt different. The air was thick with tension, like something dark and unseen was lurking in every corner. I didn't feel safe anymore. Jason's presence had left an imprint on this place, and I couldn't escape it. I locked every door, pulled the curtains shut, and sat down, my mind racing. My phone remained silent for the next few days, but I didn't feel any better. Jason could be out there, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. I knew he wouldn't stop until he had me back, until he had control of my life again. But I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't go back to being his prisoner. I had made my decision, I was done. But that didn't mean I was safe. Jason was out there, and he was going to come for me again. I just didn't know when or how. The weeks that followed were filled with a nervous, nagging energy. Jason's silence made me uneasy. I was never sure if it meant he was planning something, or if he had finally given up. But I knew he wasn't the kind of man to just let go. The longer the silence stretched, the more I worried. What was he doing? Was he planning something worse? But then, one evening, I received a message. "I'm coming for you," it read. That was it. No explanation, no further context, just a chilling promise. My heart dropped into my stomach. This wasn't over. It wasn't over by a long shot. Thank you for listening to my story until now. If you like the video, please support it by subscribing and liking.